Allah, 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 ما لنا مولى سوى الله.
Stay in your normal street clothes, and you make your ihram from Medina. Okay? You make your ihram from Medina. And when you're making your ihram from Medina, it's much more simple. You'll get on a bus, you'll probably change at the hotel. Maybe they'll probably take you to the miqat itself, the Hulayfa, and you'll change there. Some people shower there, they'll pray 2 rak'ah, they'll do all of that, and you won't pass the miqat, right? Because there's a bus, right? And there's more control over the situation. But again, in any situation, if you pass the miqat and you have not yet entered the state of ihram, then you must do a sacrifice. Second thing is staying in Arafat till sunset. Right? So again, it is wajib to stay in Arafat until sunset. You'll be there from zawal, from dhuhr time, until sunset. That is Arafat. Those are the hours of Arafah. It's about 5-6 hours that you'll be in Arafah. So the requirement is that you stay until sunset. If you leave before sunset, and most groups will not leave before sunset, most groups will stay until sunset, and then the bus will come and you'll go out to Muzdalifah. Leaving before that would also necessitate a fidya. Number 3.
Going back to the cards, the time limit is literally, like, for example, they can tell you, like, we pre-jute for your card 10-15 minutes. Because the guys don't have the time to go and change. Is it okay to make that, an hour at least
Yes.
to make sure, everything goes okay?
Yes, absolutely. So you can put on the ihram, right? And you can even make your intention well before the miqat. Right? It's the sunnah to make it at the miqat or when you're near the miqat. Right? So you can, if you're coming from the States, like you can literally go to the airport with this, right? And board the flight, we're already wearing this, and make your intention, right before you get past the ihram. So you don't have to do it right at its time. Especially if you're on, if you're flying in. Most people do it a couple of hours before, right? And they'll let you know well in advance, hey, there's 2-3 hours left. Take turns, go and change into your ihram. But the intention, you should try and make it as close to the miqat as possible, right? It's better to be safe than sorry, so give yourself 10-15 minutes prior to reaching the miqat, because the miqat, especially Jufa, it's not that far from Mecca, right? It's like about an hour away, right, from Mecca. So, and that's driving, right? So if you're flying, it's only a few minutes. Next is spending the night in Muzdalifah. Is a wajib of Hajj. So if you miss spending the night in Muzdalifah, again, you'd be required to pay the fidya. Talk about that a little bit more in detail, about leaving half the night in that situation when we get to Muzdalifah again. But just spending the night in Muzdalifah is a wajib act. All right. Spending number 4, the 2 or 3 nights, whatever you choose. Right, you have a choice, 2 or 3 nights in Mina. Those are wajib. So if you opt for 2, spending at least half or more of the night in Mina is wajib. Right? So say for example, it's the day in Mina and you go back to your hotel and you take a nap and you wake up and it's like 3 o'clock in the morning. You've missed that night in Mina. And you have to make it up with a sacrifice. Because you can, during those days in Mina, you can actually leave Mina. Yes, Ayyam Tashriq. Alright? Notice, I did not mention day 8, nothing about day 8. Alright? Day 8 will fall under the category of being a sunnah. So I'm talking about the days of Tashriq. Right? The 2 or 3 days, and it's your choice. فَمَنْ تَعَجَّلَ فِي يَوْمَيْنِ فلا إثم عليه ومن تأخر فلا إثم عليه لمن اتقى. Nowadays, most people after 2 days they're like, I'm done, I'm out, right? So there's very, very few people, probably like 10% of the people who stay after day 2. Yeah, in Mina for the days of Tashriq. The throwing of stones is also, and this is for the days of Tashriq, right? For the days of Tashriq, also are considered one of the wajibat, right? So every day that you're in Mina, you are going to be throwing 21 stones at the 3 different jama'ats. And we'll talk about that more in detail, about if a person is not able to, and all of these things. Number 6 is for those who do not consider the shaving or the trimming to be a pillar. They would consider it an obligation and that you would sacrifice if you do not shave or trim. And then lastly, one of the wajibat is tawaf al-wada', the farewell tawaf. And the farewell tawaf can be combined with tawaf al-ifada if you're leaving right after that. So if you're like leaving out of Medina on say day 13, right? And you still haven't made tawaf al-ifada, you can make tawaf al-ifada, you can combine the intention tawaf al-ifada and tawaf al-wada' and then leave the city. Right? And tawaf al-wada' is like it's your last day. Like you don't stay another night. If you stay another night, then that wasn't tawaf al-wada'. That wasn't like your farewell tawaf. Alright? And then everything else would fall under the category of sunnah. Alright? Everything else that's not mentioned and everything else that we'll talk about will fall under the category of being a sunnah. So I'm not going to list all the sunnahs for you. You'll get it from what we'll discuss in the coming sections. But everything else that wasn't mentioned, that's not either a pillar or a wajib, that's not a rukn or a mandatory act, would be considered a sunnah, meaning that there is no fidya, right? It's not required, and if you miss it, then there is no fidya. So, for example, I didn't say anything about spending day 8 in Mina. That is a sunnah. So if you miss day 8 in Mina, which, most people won't miss it, but if you do, then there's no obligation. If you miss the 2 rak'ahs after the tawaf, and Muhammad Rahim, there's no obligation. Alright? So everything else would fall under that category of being a sunnah. So any questions about what's a pillar and what's it's a wajib before we move on? Yes.
How many people? The fidya? That's including
6 people. Yeah, and most people will opt for the sacrifice, even though there is the option of fidyatun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, fidyatun min siyamin or sadaqatin or nusuk, right? And nusuk means, here, it means that sacrifice, right? And you don't have to do it yourself. You entrust those who are working and doing the sacrifice to perform it on your behalf. Just like you do for the nahab, right, which is the sacrifice that you are making for your hajj. You entrust people to do it. You're not actually, most people don't actually do it themselves. All right. Should we take a short break? Let me get through the miqat. I'll speak about each of the miqats, and then we'll take a short break. All right. So the miqat. I mentioned 5, right? I mentioned Dhul Hulayfa, which is north of Mecca, which is the miqat of the people of Medina. All right. I mentioned Juhfa, which is the miqat of the people of Sham. That's to the west, and that's our miqat, coming from the US. There's Qarn al-Manazil, the miqat for the people that are coming from Najd, that are coming from the east. There's Yalamlam for the people who are coming from the south, right, south of Mecca, which is Yemen. And then there's that Irq, which is the miqat for the people who are coming from the direction of Iraq. So the months of Hajj are 3 months. So there's what the scholars call miqat zamaniya and miqat makaniya. So there's an actual place for miqat and there's a time for miqat, right? What is the significance of saying there's a miqat zamaniya, a time constraint on the actual miqat? Meaning, al-Hajju ashhurun ma'lumat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. We know the months of Hajj. What does it mean by the months of Hajj? Shawwal, Dhul-Qa'dah, Dhul-Hijjah, right? Meaning that during those months, anytime during those months, you can make your intention for Hajj, right? So say for example, somebody like the day after Eid, they go out and they say, I'm going to make Hajj. And they go and they make this Umrah. They want to make Umrah Tamattu. They go out and they make this Umrah. They can begin their intention for Hajj for that year. Right? So that's when the time actually starts where you can actually start to make that intention. You can't start to make it, during Ramadan, right? The actual intention, like verbalizing it and actualizing it, right? That starts during the months of Hajj. Right? So that's what's meant by that miqat. And for example, if a person goes and makes Umrah, meaning the Umrah for Hajj, right? They don't go back home. Right? So if a person makes Umrah and goes back home, that's just considered a regular Umrah. If a person goes and makes Umrah, and then say they have to travel for work, and they go a couple of places in other parts of the world, and then they come back, and they just continue into the Hajj, that would be their Umrah from 2 months ago would be considered the Umrah for this Hajj. Right? And that's why we make the sacrifice for those who do Hajj Tamattu. Right? Because we are fulfilling 2 obligations on 1 trip. But if you make Umrah and you go back home, that's not 1 trip. Right? That's 2 trips. Right? You have to leave home twice, even if you decide to make Hajj after you come back home. So a little bit about each of the miqats. Dhul Hulayfa, for those of you who are going from Medina. Right? Again, how many people are starting in Medina? Alright? So those of you who are starting in Medina are going to be making ihram from Dhul Hulayfa. You're going to be making ihram from Medina. And Dhul Hulayfa is also known as Abyar Ali now. Alright? And it is the miqat of the people of Medina. The miqat of Medina is actually the furthest miqat from Mecca. It's about 420 kilometers. Right? So the miqat to Mecca is about like a 3.5 hour drive. Somebody's actually driving. If you're on a bus, it's a different case. Right? So it's like about a 3.5 hour drive. It's the furthest miqat from Mecca. And some of the scholars, when they talk about why it's the furthest miqat from Mecca, is they say because Medina, is the furthest or the closest big city to Mecca. Right? It's the closest big city to Mecca. So it gives the people who are coming from Medina, Ahl Medina, who make ihram from Medina, it gives them more time to make talbiyah as they go to Mecca. You see? Versus the other miqats, right? If somebody's coming from the US or from Africa, from Europe, they have all that time before they pass the miqat to make talbiyah and do all of these things. So that's some of the scholars say that's the hikmah behind placing the miqat of Medina the furthest from Mecca. But now this miqat is actually part of the city now, right? So it's probably like a 15 to 20 minute drive from the Prophet's Masjid to the miqat. It's not that far. It used to be considered like outside of the city, like this is the miqat of the people of Medina. And now, if you say I live next to the miqat, you essentially live in Medina. All right, and there's a lot of locals that live around there. It's kind of like the last stop before you leave the city, but there's a lot of locals who live around there. Some of the people who've been around for a long time actually live around the miqat. And the masjid of the miqat is just considered kind of one of the masajid from the masajid of Medina. Okay? And then there's Juhfa, which is our miqat, the miqat of the people of Sham. And it's the second furthest miqat from Mecca. Right, it's the second furthest miqat from Mecca. It's about 100 and some kilometers from Mecca. It's also known as Rabid. Right? The city is known as Rabid. It's kind of like the shores. There's like a big port there where there's a lot of a lot of the importing, exporting in Saudi Arabia actually happens from there. So most of the Muslims actually use that miqat. Right? So people coming from Egypt and Sham and Europe and Africa and US and Canada, most of Muslims actually pass through that miqat. Next is Qarr al-Manazil, which is the miqat from the east, the miqat of the people of Najd. Najd meaning like Riyadh, Qasim, that side of the world, and then everything east. So if a person is coming from Russia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, that part of the world, Southeast Asia, they will pass, that will be their miqat. And that miqat is actually not far, right? That miqat is actually, it's about 70 or so kilometers, so about 50 miles from Mecca. And then there's the miqat from the south, which is the miqat of the people of Yemen. It's also known, Yalamlam, also known as Sa'diyah. All right? And it's about, again, like Qarr al-Manazil, about 50 miles from Mecca. All right, so you'll see there's a miqat for all the Muslims, regardless of which direction they're coming from. So, and then there's that's Irq, which is the miqat for the people who are coming from Iraq. So if you pass through that miqat first, before you always make ihram from the first miqat that you pass. Right? So you might be in a situation where you're flying over multiple miqats. Right? You would make ihram from the first miqat that you pass. So say your flight takes you through, which is not uncommon, maybe through Yalamlam and also through Juhfa. You would make miqat from the first miqat that you cross over. And again, if you're coming from Medina, the best thing to do is make ihram from the masjid. Right? You can get into your clothing and do all of that before you come to the miqat. You can go there in your actual garments and all of that, but make the intention from the masjid. Right? That's the best thing to do. But if you're flying, again, 10 to 15 minutes before, make your intention. For the people from Mecca, right? If you live in Mecca, then you make your intention from home. You make your intention from home and you go out for Hajj. If you're living in Jeddah, the people of Jeddah will just make their ihram from home, right? Because if you live anywhere within the boundaries of the miqat, right? So if you're closer to Mecca than the actual miqat, then you would just make your intention from your house and you would go out. That's for Hajj. For Umrah, it's different. For Umrah, the people of Mecca, they would go out to Masjid Aisha,